Hello, 1, 2. Hello there, everyone. TV. Okay. I hear you. Reaver 501 says just reboot and start over at 11:30. Jeffrey Maris says, I hear you, Rayo. Can anybody, now we hear Joe R. So all of you out there, if you can hear me, um, I guess all of you, I can hear Joe Rayo, but Joe C. Still can't hear Joe C. From Joe R.O. All right. Well, folks, guess what? It's the Joe Rayo show. It's going to be all
Like,
Joe Rayo this half hour.
like hell it is. You got me back now.
Time to vamp Joe Rayo.
All right, I'm sorry, folks. This is one of those moments where I don't know what happened, but the audio settings got changed. It just took me a little while to figure it out. So I'll tell you what, and this is not making me happy because I got to then go back and edit all of this. So uh, let's do this. Let's start over, okay? So,
Tony M says, got Joe C and Joe R now.
okay, yes.
There we go.
Yeah, so let's start over. Since you didn't
All
hear the open and it was so brilliant, we'll.
right, wait a minute. Hang on for a second.
Okay.
Hold on. Hi, everybody.
And here we are live where everything is spinning in, except in the tropics, and it ain't the alcohol that's doing it, okay? So
Uh,
it's the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and we've got Paulette, we've got Sally, we have Tropical Depression 20, we have a dying Rene, and a new tropical wave that's going to become a depression in short order. So, uh, with Mr. Rayo, with regards to Paulette going to Bermuda, it's a very small target to hit Bermuda. So even though it gets impacted by a lot of hurricanes, it's not too often. I think Gonzalo may have been the last one back a number of years ago, if I recall. It was the one where the eye passed almost right over the island. But Paulette may do the same, and it's coming in from the southeast. And the other issue is, and you'll, the other issue is with Sally in the Gulf of Mexico is the fact that it is going to head toward southeast Louisiana, and it's kind of similar to Marco, but the only difference is that Marco ran into strong wind shear in the west in the Gulf at that time and fell apart before it reached the Louisiana coast. This is not going to happen this time around, and conditions are going to be favorable. There's a chance that this could strengthen fairly rapidly before landfall.
right. And in fact, as we were noting before we were so inconveniently interrupted a few moments ago. Back with Laura, we spoke about how that storm could dramatically intensify because the waters just off of the coastal plain of Louisiana are at this time of the year about as warm as they get. And so any kind of tropical cyclone that interacts with those waters and has the favorability of not having to interact with any kind of upper level shear certainly could intensify very quickly in a relatively short interval of time, and that may very well happen with Sally. So, and you think about it, Joe, with Laura, they had been looking at Laura for a number of days. When I say they, I'm talking about along the Gulf Coast, wondering and waiting, and But with Sally, Sally just took shape over the last 48 hours, and now all of a sudden, not only are we dealing with a tropical cyclone, but we may be dealing with a potentially major tropical weather system again for the Louisiana coastline. So it's something that they're going to have to get going and prepare for very quickly over the next day or two.
And this is another example, by the way, and we've had quite a few of them this season where the global weather models in the long range did not pick up on this. And I been saying all along, when it comes to the tropics, the weather models don't always work very well. Either they way overdo it, or sometimes they way underdo it, or sometimes they completely ignore stuff that's out there. So the other thing that bothers me about Sally is the fact that, as you mentioned, it just kind of came out of nowhere as it developed east of the Florida coast. And you always get a little nervous when something does that and then starts to really outperform any kind of expectations, because it seems like it went from disturbed weather and it organized into a tropical depression very quickly. And now it's a tropical storm, of course, interacting with the landmass of Florida made it problematic in terms of getting it to organize further and strengthen, but still held its own pretty well. And now in the open waters of Gulf, I noticed, there's some 50-knot winds out at the 45 and 50-mile-an-hour winds out at the buoys. Now, this thing may wind up surprising some more before it's all said and done.
I was looking last night at the zero Z run of the GFS, and it's not until again just before landfall in the wee hours of the morning on Tuesday that it shows signs of suddenly the isobars coming together really quickly, really
Right.
rapid, you know,
And
that
and and,
dense
and the
that
NAM
dense
shows it
look.
even better.
Right. And that is the time when you got to be thinking that, oh my goodness, this thing is going to rev up again, literally at the last minute. And unfortunately, batten down right on the Louisiana coastline. The folks at New Orleans are going to have to be very concerned about Sally as she moves in their direction over the next 48 hours.
Jeffrey Mara hitting super chat today. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for doing that. And we appreciate it greatly. I got the full U.S. satellite, and we're going to go through all the latest advisories which just came out from the Hurricane Center. We'll take it through one by one, but you don't get to see a shot like this too often when you've got two named storms on this particular satellite view. But you can see Paulette on the center right, or right center actually, or maybe it's center right. It's on the far right. There it is. And the eye of Paulette is showing up now rather distinctly. And it looks like it's actually gotten better organized this morning and heading on a west northwest to northwest course and looking as if it's going to go right over Bermuda, at least from the standpoint of what the Hurricane Center is forecasting. And again, coming in from the southeast here is a bit more problematic than when it comes up from the southwest. Not that it's any picnic when it comes up from the southwest, it isn't. But again, the ocean water temperatures here are probably warmer than they are uh, when you go when you go further to the west. And the upper air winds, when they come up from the southwest, tend to be strong, and that sometimes distorts these storms, or you create some shearing. I don't know if you're going to have that this time around. So we're going to watch what happens with this. This too might wind up strengthening stronger than modeled. Sally in the Gulf of Mexico, Joe, looks like it continues to organize. They're getting heavy rain along the west coast of Florida from this. It's got to move out a little bit further offshore before the rains come to an end. But this thing's looking like it's trying to wrap around around the northeast to northwest side and strengthening. So we'll look see if there's a recon out there as well.
I'm beginning to wonder now. Now we are watching that depression out over the central Atlantic. That likely is going to become Teddy
Right.
before too long. And I'm sure you noticed, Joe, that last night we had a rather unusual setup scenario projected by the GFS, where you keep your eye on Teddy and you say to yourself, all right, let's see what Teddy does relative to the Atlantic seaboard. And then again, this is on the zero Z run of the GFS. All of a sudden, literally out of nowhere, off of the Carolina coastline around the 22nd of September, it pops another apparent tropical system, again, literally out of
Right. I
nowhere.
saw that.
And now you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? And Teddy, again, we're already pre-naming it. Teddy suddenly becomes forgotten. This new system suddenly pops up out of nowhere, comes northward along the Atlantic coast, gives the tri-state area a glancing blow. It stays out at sea, becomes precariously close, and then kind of zooms away to the north and east. Now, on the 6Z run, rather anxiously, we looked to see whether or not the GFS did the same thing. Not quite. It continues to show Teddy or potential Teddy moving along, and then all of a sudden, this second system pops, but it pops way out to the east behind Teddy as it retreats away to the north and east. So I really don't know what the
Well,
GFS is
I'm
making
playing catch
imply.
up here with you, so I just I'm bringing it up so everybody can see what you're saying here. So because we'll come back to this too, and we'll roll it back. There's actually, Joe. It's got Teddy as a hurricane here by Tuesday, if you
Right.
believe the GFS on the 6Z. Paulette has already is moving northeastward and moving out.
And Paulette does something weird. At least on the 0Z run, I saw it goes north and east. You figure, okay, this thing is going to become an extratropical storm and hit Europe somewhere. No,
It
it all of a
drops
sudden
south,
it
right?
stopped
Well,
and
yeah.
then loop the loop
Well,
back to the
there's an
tropical.
upper low that's dropping down east of the Azores off the coast of Portugal, and that causes it gets caught in the northwest flow from that and drops southward. But meanwhile, Teddy, responding from the weakness that Paulette creates in the upper atmosphere, starts to turn northwest and northward. And yeah, then you see that system that sort of pops up off the North Carolina coast, and on it goes. I go back to what I've been saying all last week. There's too many things out there spinning, and the models are having a horrendous time figuring out how these systems are all interacting with each other, and that's why I think you're seeing, these model switches back and forth from run to run. One run is dynamic. One run has you're thinking that there's going to be a threat for the East Coast. Another run, the next run says no. It stays out to the east, and then you get these other tropical waves that the models work on. So I think we just have to. This is really a day-to-day thing for us. So just kind of waiting for the events to actually settle down, so we can figure out just exactly what in the name of God is going to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely,
So
and yeah, there's just too much.
there's
You
too
know,
much.
these are supercomputers, folks, and we often, proclaim, oh, these things they go through billions of calculations in a blink of an eye or whatever. But when there's just too much out there for them to, it's hard for them to concentrate.
It
Let's say on
hurts.
one particular system, they're trying to concentrate on like 4 or 5 different potentials, and again, it's just it's if the computers could talk, say, no, well, what do we concentrate on first? That thing heading for Bermuda, or that thing that's possibly developing out in the Central Atlantic? And what
Right.
about Rene? Will it die out completely? And Sally and that. Ah!
I know it's a lot. It really is. By the way, back on the U.S. loop, because there's a couple of things I want to point out here that stand out. First off, for our area in the Northeast and Mid Atlantic states in the short term, we do have this cold front that is approaching and going to be moving through. And there's a lot of clouds up in western New York and western Pennsylvania, and we're seeing some cloud cover that's starting to generate here for the midday hours. But that front's going to fall apart. There's probably not going to be much to it as it goes by, and then we're going to get into the dry air behind it. But going now to the fires, Joe. Looking at the loop, the GOES loop, it's amazing the extent of the smoke that you can pick out. It's going to run down, of course, to California, and it's streaming up through Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and then running up ahead of that cold front. I know I have it drawn here behind, but because the front is actually a little bit further back than I have it here on the satellite. But the bottom line is that you're seeing a lot of this West Coast fire smoke here that is streaming up to our west. And it's really impressive. And there's also smoke that looks like it's coming over the top from the Pacific Northwest in the northern jet right along the Canadian border. And if you look carefully on the upper left, that smoke actually goes well out into the Pacific Ocean. It's astounding how dominating smoke for the wildfire smoke feature is across the U.S. There's a lot
I
of
saw a I saw a very surreal picture. Somebody took a photograph of a Major League Baseball game. I believe it was being held either in San Francisco
yeah.
or
I think I saw the picture too. The San
yeah,
Francisco, yeah.
empty stadium, but a baseball game in progress, and the sky just like a flaming orange red because of all the dust.
Uh,
Unbelievable.
I don't know what's left.
2020, Joe.
No, I
2020.
know. I'm trying to figure out what's next. It's got to be a blizzard in the Northeast in November. It has to be. That has to be what the outcome is out of
or
all of this.
or
And
and I brought this up a while back or whatever like that. Dr. Klaus Jacob of the Earth Laboratory in Palisades, Lamont, who I did this report with him about 10 years ago, saying, more than 10 years ago, saying that we're overdue, the tri state area is overdue for a Richter 5.5 or 6 earthquake. And you know as well as I do, Joe, the infrastructure just was not built for a
right.
Richter 6 earthquake. So
So
that's
now
the
we're
last
talking
thing we need.
earthquakes.
And you know what will
How
probably
about
happen? It'll probably happen on November 3rd.
do do we have I'm just I'm trying to recall. Are there any are there any dormant volcanoes in the eastern part of the United States?
No.
Oh, too bad. Maybe one can come up from the ground
Hey,
and form.
what about that? What about that volcano in the Canary Islands somewhere? That supposedly, when it does erupt fully, it's going to cause
Right,
it'll
the
cause
big
a tidal
tidal
wave,
wave, because yeah,
tsunami that's going to move westward. And
I'm on the North Shore in Long Island. I'll have beachfront property.
uh,
All right, so let's look at the. I'll just bring up the radar.
uh, a friend of mine who I worked with for many years, a very respected reporter, and a Murrow award-winning reporter, John Goff. He saw Deep Impact. Remember that movie, Deep Impact, with the
Yes,
comet going into the Atlantic Ocean and causing the giant tidal wave, and it enters Manhattan and it knocks down the Statue of Liberty and all the skyscrapers. And John told me, he says, if that happened, I wouldn't worry. He said, I live uptown.
exactly. All right, let's look at the radar, and we have these again showers in western New York, western Pennsylvania. They are not going to make it to the coast. They should fall apart. This was supposed to be a wipeout Sunday with regards to showers, but that from what we saw in the middle part of last week, and of course that wound up not happening. You're seeing some of the heavy rains from Tropical Storm Sally still right along the Florida West Coast, where we have flash flood watches up. And I did have somewhere here, I'll have to find it. Yeah, here we go. So I did actually have the hourly OBS. The winds along the coast were gusting over gale force for a while overnight and this morning, but we have a buoy that's just offshore that is southeast at 36, gusting to 45, and there's a 49 knot gust. It's 36 to 49 at buoy 42022 out in the open waters of the Gulf. But again, moving away, and mostly south-southeast winds here off of over central and South Florida. But the heavy rains right along the immediate coast with the flash flooding, that is going to diminish again. And then we're going to shift our attention, of course, further north, where you have the hurricane warnings that are up from Grand Isle, Louisiana, all the way east to the Alabama-Florida border, and tropical storm warnings on either side. And you are this includes, by the way, the city of New Orleans, Lake Pontchartrain, Biloxi, Gulfport. This is a problem going back to south. By the way, Joe, is the fact that coming in also from the southeast for southeast Louisiana is a huge deal because that comes in into where you could flood the waters in a storm surge will flood into Lake Pontchartrain, and it's kind of tricky trying to figure out whether that's going to happen or not because of the between the angle of approach, and then you have to figure out what's the deal with the tides. So this is not an easy forecast for the Hurricane Center
No,
to deal with, not at all.
not at all, indeed. And you think, I'm not sure what maybe you do because you were an intern a long time ago at the National Weather Service, but with so many tropical cyclones out there, and we always read the technical discussions, there's always a forecaster who's assigned to a particular tropical cyclone, hurricane, tropical system. So I wonder how this is all working out, where the head of the National Hurricane Center says, all right, Charlie, you're going to do Rene, Jim, you're going to do this storm. And that's, it normally is not like that. But again, there's so many out there either actually happening or so many potentials. It must be a very, very busy time down at
Oh
the
yeah, I mean
National.
it's rare to have four working name storm systems, which we could well have by late today or tonight, the way things are going. And there's still that other wave behind it that looks well organized. So we might wind up we may still have four, we may have five on the scene in
I
a
don't
day or
remember.
two.
I can't. I could remember three. I'm barely able to perceive four. I can't even remember five names going on at once. But I guess there's that possibility that we could see that before the end of this week.
Yeah, I
Five
think
different names.
briefly a couple of years ago we had Irma, uh, Jose, Katia, and Lee, and at the same time, and then Maria showed on the scene as well. So I think there was a stretch there where there were four working storms, and maybe even a brief time where there were five at the same time. But yeah, that is certainly a rare occurrence, and I think the record is six. To have six working storms at the same time. So that's got to be a juggler's nightmare, pretty much. So
Yeah.
just showing some of the model guidance this morning, by the way, on the intensity guidance with with Tropical Storm Sally. You do have a number of the models now bringing this up to Category 1 strength before landfall, and they all show varying amounts of strengthening in terms of the rate of strengthening. Some happening faster than others. At this point, I think for some reason, I hark back to Hurricane Michael, where conditions weren't ideal. There was 20 knots of constant shear through the whole thing, and somehow it managed to get to a Category 5. I'm not saying that this will, but I just think back to that when that happened last year, and how it wound up surprising forecasters who didn't think, including myself, not thinking that it would get much beyond a Category 1 or 2. The forecast tracks, Joe, are pretty tight on the model guidance, the hurricane model guidance. Almost all of them have it in some fashion in southeast Louisiana, but then you have various models taking right turns from there, and some doing it faster than others. That's another thing here. This may wind up slowing down as it approaches the coastline, because the upper air is suggesting that the upper air, that ridge to the north that's lying east-west across the Gulf states, is not that strong. So the flow is not that strong, and we might wind up seeing this slow down right before landfall.
Right. Right. Yeah. As I said just a few moments ago, busy times over at the National Hurricane Center.
All right, so let's look at the. We could do two at once here. So I'm going to bring up the NAM first, the new NAM, to take a look at how it handles both Sally and Paulette. And the I'll start with the upper air. The NAM's range goes out just far enough to catch Paulette in the picture, but you'll see here that you have a shortwave trough that's running from James Bay down into the eastern lakes. And that's our cold front that's going to be coming through. And this is what's left, by the way, of the uh, summer winter storm in the Rockies from last week, if you recall. But that shortwave's going pretty far to our north, which is the reason why we're not really seeing those showers holding together as they move across um, New England, the Northeast, and into the Mid-Atlantic states. Here's Paulette on the lower right. Here's the upper air representation of Sally. You have an upper high that is off the east coast to the north of Paulette, and that ridge extends you have that little nose poking into northern Mississippi, Louisiana, and southern Arkansas. So you have Sally kind of riding the periphery of that ridge, and you have Paulette that's trying to crash that upper high, pushing up to the north. The high is attempting to cradle it, but Paulette being is able to kind of cut into that high, and that high actually weakens as we go through the day today. So that creates the weakness, and you see Paulette going pretty much right over the island of Bermuda by 4 or 5 a.m. Meanwhile, Sally is also now in a state of weakness because the shortwave trough in the north has pulled out, and of course the ridge is gone. It's not that it's gone; it's very weak here. You can't. It's very hard to find. This is higher pressure aloft to the north of it, but you don't have that strong ridge like we just started with when you saw on the map that finger that was poking back into Arkansas and Mississippi. So it lends the argument that you could wind up seeing Sally slow down quite a bit as it gets closer to the coast of southeast Louisiana, which is what the NAM is hinting at. And then notice that, at least from the standpoint of the upper air, it starts to get really wound up very tight here as it moves into southeast Louisiana. Meanwhile, you see Paulette, of course, now responding to the shortwave, moving off through New England and southeastern Canada, takes a sharp right turn and moves on out to the northeast. I think Paulette's pretty much going to play according to plan. It's Sally at this point that I think warrants attention. And Joe, when you look at the surface map here, the other thing is that with respect to Sally, that the NAM model is showing some rather steady strengthening up until about midday tomorrow. It gets down to about a 993, and then suddenly after that,
Right.
going into Tuesday morning, this is where it drops down into the low 970s.
Right.
And we saw with Laura where low and middle
By the way,
970s on the guidance wound up being down about 940.
the Weather Channel just called up Jim Cantori and said, "You're going to Louisiana."
Okay.
They probably just, said, "Jim, no question about it. Get on, get your plane. We got your plane reservations." It is amazing, Joe, and we pointed this out just a little while ago, a few moments ago, how dramatically Sally just intensifies in those final hours before landfall, early Tuesday morning, near the Louisiana and Mississippi coastline. So,
And that's something when you're dealing with tropical systems, you, the reality is when you catch them, they're at their worst, or potentially can be at their worst in terms of potential, if they're in the intensification mode when they make landfall. That's when you can have some really destructive wind gusts occurring. It might be a category 1, let's say, might be a category 1 or a category 2 technically, but if it's in that strengthening phase before landfall, this is where you wind up seeing some odd things happening with regards to very heavy squalls sweeping inland with unusually high wind gusts. And the upper air, by the way, when we look at what's going on in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, Sally is, we're looking at the wind flow at 200 millibars, or roughly, getting up about 30,000 feet. And what you would look for a storm to strengthen is the fact that it has an upper high over it. Hurricanes are warm core systems. They are very strong at the bottom of the atmosphere, but very weak at the top. So if there's a high up at the higher levels of the atmosphere, so winds actually diminish with height, as opposed to a cold core storm where it's the other way around. But the light winds in the upper atmosphere, the lack of wind shear, is what allows these storms to strengthen, along with the very, very warm water. But at this level, when you look at the light colored lines here, okay, those are actually the winds in the upper atmosphere up at 30,000 feet, and the L that you see printed, that's where it says, that's where the center of the surface low is. That's an upper high. That's a strong anticyclone that is sitting right over it, and it holds it till it gets to landfall. You see the strong upper air winds that are further northwest up into the Gulf states and heading up into the middle Mississippi Valley. You have very strong southwesterly winds up at that level of the atmosphere, but that's when it's well inland. So it looks like this has a very good outflow pattern. It's not an ideal outflow pattern, for super strengthening, but it's certainly enough here where we could wind up seeing this outperform. And in the meantime, you can follow Paulette along. That's the 982 in the over to the right as it heads towards Bermuda, and it too has an upper air anticyclone over it, and it carries it pretty much all the way along. So it's holding its own. And there's actually also, by the way, to the west of Paulette, we have a trough right there, and this is why Paulette's going to respond to that trough and make the sharp right turn. So you're looking at some pretty supportive upper air conditions. And just a quick check, Joe, with respect to the other two systems out in the tropics, Rene's going to disappear because Rene's just kind of lying in between all of this stuff going on, and the other systems are just so much more dominant. But looking at the longer range with respect to the upper air in the Atlantic, you still have with the next system, which, by the way, the GFS already has, again, by Tuesday or Wednesday. By Tuesday, it looks like it has either a strong tropical storm or even a minimal hurricane with regards to what's going to be Teddy here. Here's Monday. Yeah, I mean, it's already down to a 977 by Tuesday morning. But you're looking at fairly ideal conditions for development for these systems with the light wind shear conditions, a good outflow setting up in the tropical Atlantic. So there's no reason to think that things won't stop spinning anytime soon.
Nope. Nope. Well, I mean, we just what we did 2 days ago, 3 days ago was the traditional peak of the hurricane season, and we know that things continue at a rather rigorous or rather vigorous pace
Yes.
through at least the 10th of October, at least before things start winding on down, or showed signs of winding on down based on long time climatological records. Robust. That was the word I was looking for. Things are going to
Robust.
remain. Things will continue to be robust in the tropical waters for at least another 3 or 4 weeks before we see the beginnings of any kind of decline. And of course, by that time, certainly we'll be into the Greek alphabet. And half kiddingly, Joe, I said the way things have been going lately, what happens if we use up all the letters in the Greek alphabet?
Well, we got a ways to do. That's not going to happen. That isn't going to happen.
Oh,
But
so he said.
I know it is 2020.
Yeah.
We do have a reconnaissance mission right now in progress into Sally, and it's just flying. It's just offshore the Florida coast. The plane is flying toward the center, and there's a long stretch of winds here of 45 to 50 knots, running, actually even going inland. The gales, at least at flight level, Joe, from inland of the Florida coast, and then running northwestward out into the Gulf of Mexico, and then now the plane is heading southward. So it's probably going to start getting to a point where it'll be able to close off a center. But at least on the northern part of this, we're seeing 45 to 50 knot winds at flight level. And the lowest pressure that they reported is, and I'm just looking here on the graphic. So you got 40 to 45 knots, some winds above 45 knots, some surface winds being reported up to almost 45 knots from where the plane is now. And it looks like they just bottomed a pressure somewhere around 1,000 millibars. So we've seen they may not actually be where the center is yet. So we just have to give it a little bit more time. And checking to see if there's anything into Paulette. Probably not. There was one earlier. And we'll see if it loads up. I'm trying to load up Mission 3 into Paulette. There is a plane now on the way to Paulette. The plane at the moment is at 28.3 and 63.2. So it's not quite there yet, but definitely on its way. And we'll have to just check this out. We won't probably get anything more definitive from this during the show today, but we'll update this afternoon on the various platforms that I update on. Okay, so let's look at the Hurricane Center's forecast for Sally Forecast to become a hurricane by tomorrow afternoon, 27-3, 84.6. Top winds are 50 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 13. This is, of course, a good time, by the way, Joe, to remind everybody that when it comes to decisions that you might have to make regarding tropical storms and hurricanes, you should rely on your local officials so you can get information from them, as well as the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center. You can find both of those at NOAA.gov for the Weather Service and NHC.NOAA.gov for the National Hurricane Center's website. But the forecast, Joe, from the Hurricane Center pretty much follows model. They kind of take consensus here, taking sort of a middle of a road approach. Again, what happens when it gets to Southeast Louisiana or approaches Southeast Louisiana? Are we going to see this rapidly strengthen? I think that's the big question here.
Well, it could be the big question if I had money and if there was some place where you can put money down on the strengthening of a tropical system. I'd put a few bucks down on this thing really winding up, and I would not be surprised, Joe, at all if before making landfall, Sally gets all the way up to a Category 2. I'll say that right here and now, and that would be again in the dawn hours. And why do these things of late? Why do all of these things
coming in at night?
At night, I don't understand this. It seems like every time we are facing a significant or a possible severe threat from a tropical system, wherever it may make landfall, it's always at night and usually in the wee hours of the morning, pre-dawn hours. Why? I don't know.
I don't know either. I had thought about that last night. It looked why this one too is going to make landfall during the early morning hours. You get a stretch of them sometimes that make landfall at high tide. I can think of instances when we had nor'easters, and it just all of a sudden seemed like every time there was a full moon, there was a nor'easter around. Then you get into stretches where that doesn't happen. So I guess it's just a roll of the dice, really.
You just reminded me of something, and that is that the moon is going to be approaching new phase, and in fact, not this month, but next month, the new moon is going to coincide with perigee, its closest point to the Earth, which means this full moon, the full moon before, probably is going to have abnormally higher than normal tides anyway, even without a tropical system. So this is not the thing that you want to see if you're in the path of a tropical storm, is an impending new moon, an impending closer than normal new moon, as we're going to see during this upcoming week.
When's the new moon?
I believe, off the top of my head, I think it's either Wednesday or Thursday of this week.
All right, because I want to fish it. I know we're worried about hurricanes and everything, but I'm also worried. I'm also thinking about taking a day to go fishing. So the new moon would help me. Here's Paulette's track, fairly straightforward as a hurricane. Moves over Bermuda overnight, and then makes the sharp right turn. I still think, Joe, that we're probably going to see rough surf around here for developing maybe later tomorrow and into Tuesday, given the height of the north and also the fact that you've got the hurricane that's out over the coastal waters. So we might have some rough surf over along the New England coast to down into the Mid-Atlantic states. I don't think it'll be anything too crazy, but it will be on the rough side.
New moon is Thursday.
Okay, so I got to plan some. I got to plan to fish that. And Rene, by the way, is what's left of it. And in a lot of ways, by the way, Rene has probably had the bigger impact on the systems in the Atlantic in terms of their track just by being there, because it created various weaknesses and strengths in the upper pattern across the subtropical Atlantic that impacted the track of these systems. But it is forecast to become a remnant low with everything, all the systems that are out there surrounding it just basically overpowered this thing. And we saw it come off as a strong tropical wave off the African coast. And it looked like, at least from this, I didn't agree with the Hurricane Center's initial forecast of strengthening it to a hurricane. And that was their view of it. I just thought there was just too much going on. And as it turned out, it really never, ever got much beyond minimal tropical storm. And now, of course, it is forecast to become a remnant low and just and disappear. So I get from the standpoint of historical perspective, Mr. Rayo, it did its job of getting a name out of the way.
Right.
All right, so I'm going to go to the new GFS soon. Um, it's coming out, but before we go to the new one, I want to go back to the prior GFS run so we could take a look at the upper air pattern across the United States and what is going to be happening with regards to our regular weather. Okay. So this week, Mr. Rayo, it looks like of course, we have this cold front that's coming through today and leaving the showers behind to our west. And you still have, as we look at the upper flow, at least through this week into next weekend, this northwest flow from Canada sending shortwave after shortwave after shortwave. So we've got some nice cool weather coming up this week. I saw the forecast lows on Tuesday morning from the Hudson Valley and points south. A lot of 40s in there.
Yes, yes, and this is going to be a very autumnal, a very delightful stretch of weather from later tomorrow and tomorrow night, right through Tuesday and Wednesday, and even perhaps Thursday as well. By the way, Joe, the new information on at least Paulette has just come out from the National Hurricane Center, and they are projecting that Paulette is going to be almost directly over Bermuda at 12Z tomorrow morning, packing sustained winds near the center of 105 miles per hour.
All right, so they bring it up to a strong 2. I think there's an outside chance. There's an outside chance it could get a little bit stronger than that. Uh, Bermuda's they're a hardy bunch there in Bermuda. Was they've gotten hit with hurricanes. I remember when they got hit with Gonzalo, and the damage was extensive. And then like 2 weeks later, you saw a video from Bermuda, and everything was fixed. It was as if nothing had happened. I mean, they do such a good job with regards to when they get impacted with hurricanes. They get to work right afterward and just fix everything.
And they're headlining, by the way, Sally, expected to strengthen tonight and Monday. Life-threatening storm surge, hurricane force winds, heavy rain expected along portions of the northern Gulf Coast starting on Monday. And I can see from the discussion that they are projecting by 48 hours. Well, 48 hours, they've got 75 mile per hour winds. They've got the peak winds at 36 hours. This would be for tomorrow night, Monday night at 90 miles an hour. And then they have it inland by 48 hours.
Right.
But if that be the case, if it's inland at 48 hours or our time, 8 o'clock in the morning, Tuesday, 7 o'clock in the morning, Central Time, and it's already 90 miles per hour before making landfall, you got to expect that, think that it may even go to 100 or more. And think about this, Joe. You talk about a busy hurricane center. They're going to have to contend with landfall or island passage of Paulette tomorrow morning, and then less than 24 hours later, they have to concentrate on Sally making landfall along the Gulf Coast of the United States. Wow.
Yeah, they're getting paid straight time too. I'm sure there's some overtime in there. Just looking at the other upper pattern over the next couple of weeks, I don't really see too much change. Uh, the the flow from Canada, it's a very progressive flow. Everything moving pretty quickly from west to east. The tropical systems seem to recurve in these short waves. Now, of course, that all depends on timing. Might be there on one run, not in the next. And we've already talked about just the fact that there's so many storms out there makes the models go extra crazy. But Joe, I really don't see too much change here going forward in the longer term. You still have a flow from Canada that wants to send down shortwave troughs and cooler air masses that should be coming into the east from time to time with brief warm-ups in between. So maybe this time around we're actually experiencing a natural transition into autumn as opposed to these years where we've seen these extensions of summer right through the month of October and even into the month of November. Maybe, and last year we had it, we had that stretch into early October before it broke, but looks like maybe this year we're not going to have that kind of warm weather extension of summer.
And to go along with what you've just said, the 3 to 4 week experimental prog for probability of temperature and precipitation has the eastern third of the country, save for the Florida Peninsula, most of the Florida Peninsula, but the eastern third of the country, for the most part, below normal from the 26th of September through the 5th of October. And they also have near or below normal temperatures. So it might near to below normal precipitation. So who knows? As we move into the latter part of this month, we might actually experience what you just said, Joe, a rather coolish and a rather dry spell of weather for our part of the country, which is something that we haven't really seen over the
Right,
last 4 or 5
and
years.
that's a good point with respect to being dry because uh, with a northwest flow from Canada, you really don't have much to work with as far as access to moisture is concerned. So our front today obviously falls apart. The next front, the high builds in, and the next that high goes out on Tuesday night, Wednesday. The next front approaches late on Thursday. Now, the only thing for Thursday was weather front. Is the question would be whether some of the remnant rain from Sally, which the GFS and a couple of the other models, because try to squeeze up to the north and east. Even if this happens, to me, it doesn't look like anything impactful. And in fact, if you look literally at the GFS for New England down to Northern Virginia, that little stripe of showers is just a weak line of showers with the cold front, and there are some patches of rain that move through the southeast and the Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina, and then move out. So I don't think this is going to have any real impact. So other than maybe the chance of a shower late on Thursday, another high builds in after that, and we get back into this sort of northeast onshore flow. Moisture in the Carolinas out to the northeast where the frontal boundary is, but for the northern mid-Atlantic to southern New England, it's still really going to be about northwest flow and cold fronts aloft, and we don't see there's nothing major here, nothing through the 16 days. But there
Mm.
are tropical systems running around, and
And
that's the one variable that we have to wait to figure out.
and Teddy, or likely will become Teddy in the next 24 hours. The latest information on that has it as a 110 mile per hour hurricane, a major hurricane by Friday morning of next week, of this upcoming
All
week.
right, so we may still hit the majors numbers. Let's just let me give a big thanks to Scott Briller, who's not feeling well. By the way, the chairman spent way too much time having a good time in South Jersey, so he is not feeling well. So we wish him the best, and for hitting super chat today, and also Jeffrey Mara hitting super chat earlier. And once again, let me just apologize for what went on in the beginning. I must have had a Windows update done while I was sleeping, and anytime that happens, my it resets all my settings, my audio settings, and I should have checked beforehand. But when it works fine every day, I forget to check, and well, there you go.
It doesn't
So
when it does a Windows update, Joe, doesn't it just reset and you have to when you turn on your look at your computer screen, you have to start or reboot from the beginning?
no, mine on Windows 10, mine is it's set to kind of do. I have mine set to do updates when I'm asleep at night.
Uh-huh.
So when I come back, the computer is back on and everything is the way it was, the way I left it before I went to bed.
Right.
And it really doesn't change. The only thing but what it does do is for whatever reason, it goes in and changes your audio settings. It might go in and change your video settings. And well, guess what? I need my audio settings and I need my video
Your
settings to
settings.
be just right so that the Joe and Joe Weather Show can go on without a hitch, which it didn't quite do today. So anyway, this will also the show, by the way, will also be available as a podcast once I'm done editing out the first 10 minutes, and, and then we'll put it up on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and various other places. By the way, I'll bring up some Briller Jeopardy because he did leave me one. September 12th. 27 years ago on September 12th, Raymond Burr passed away. And as everybody knows, I'm a big Perry Mason fan, so I just wanted to
Oh, the
bring
color
that.
episode is the color episode. The one lone color episode of Perry Mason is going to air tomorrow night at 11:30. That's the one with Victor Buono, who seems to be a perennial guest on the Perry Mason show. He's going to
Yes.
be he will be part of that tomorrow night. So
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a and I'm not a big fan of the color episode. I just think it changes the whole dynamic of the show seeing it in
right,
color. It didn't work for me. It really didn't. All right, so you ready for Briller Jeopardy?
yes,
What is the state closest to Africa?
the state closest to Africa,
Yes.
I'd have to say North Carolina. Well, wait a minute, hold on. It's either North Carolina or Maine. And I'm trying to remember now the longitude of Cape Hatteras versus the longitude of Eastport. I'm going to say Maine.
Maine is correct. The angle of the dangle here is very important. So, uh, okay. What color of rose signifies love at first sight?
What color of
What
rose?
color rose? The
Oh,
rose flower. What color rose signifies love at first sight?
I would guess love at first sight would mean something virginal. So I'll say a white rose.
No, lavender. Okay.
Lavender?
Now, what
And
color?
that was the official color of our alma mater, Joe. At
Yes.
City College was lavender.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
what color rose would signify the first fight is a different story. You could say red for blood,
uh-huh.
but but or any other darker color.
Does
Uh,
white rose stand for anything except tea?
yeah. By the way, just speaking of roses, when I was out in Ohio back a couple of months ago visiting my daughter near Ohio State, there's a park there in Columbus, Ohio. I forgot the name of this park, Joe, but what they're known for is their rose garden, which is huge. Okay. And they
Okay.
have virtually every single variety of rose I think that exists planted in this sort of big, gigantic garden. It's quite a sight. I got some pictures. I took a bunch of pictures of it, and I caught it past the peak, and it still was just magnificent. So if you're ever in Columbus, Ohio, you got to go visit this park that's got the rose garden. And the last question is, what age did how old was Elvis Presley when he either left this earth or went up to an attic apartment in Ypsilanti, Michigan, where he's been ever since?
I think he was 43,
42.
42.
42.
Okay.
I make
Yeah.
reference to the fact that there are people who think that Elvis did not die, but just kind of went into seclusion. But
Well,
and
whoever played
I always made the joke that he took a studio apartment in an attic in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and that's where he is.
Elvis in the movie Forrest Gump. I mean, that was you talk about a doppelganger. That was a dead on, at least Elvis in the 1950s. If you remember that particular scene in Forrest Gump.
Yes. Oh,
Uh,
very much so. Yeah, very much. Brandon Doherty hit super chat. Thank you very much, Brandon. Joe and I appreciate it. Rosendo Benitez asks, "What do we think of apparently there was a La Nina advisory that was
September
issued
10th. Yeah.
over the last couple of days. I didn't read it, Joe. Did you read it?
No, I didn't read it, but I mean, we've been on a La Nina watch for it seems like forever. So you figured that they were going to eventually pull the trigger and proclaim an advisory, a La Nina advisory, and they've done that. And I guess we'll see where that will all go.
Yeah, look, the hurricane season from the onset has reflected the fact that we're in some kind of La Nina because whenever we have La Ninas, the Atlantic Basin very active, and I think the fact probably that we have the La Nina strengthening, timing out and coinciding with the progression of hurricane season from when the first name storms popped up in May. I think those the timing of the two of them is the reason why we're almost to the Greek alphabet and we're not even out of the month of September.
Right, right.
By the way, I didn't mention this, but of course the formations of Paulette, Rene, and Sally all were the earliest that record where every storm this year is the earliest we've ever seen the A storm, the B storm, whatever, wherever it started. That just continues. So if we wind up with Teddy, it'll be the earliest T storm, and if we put Vicky and Wilfred on the map in the next week or two, because I think Wilma was an October storm, the only time I remember us getting to a W. So um, that's going to be we're going to be on the Greek alphabet before the month of September is out. The way we're going.
Absolutely. You want your Briller Jeopardy questions here?
Yes,
Or?
by all means.
Okay, here's the first one. Has nothing to do with the weather. Where was the very first White Castle restaurant located?
Where was the first White Castle located? I
Yes,
don't know. I don't know. I don't know the origins of White Castle, whether it was a New York company or from some other part of the country. I'm I'm going to say Boston. I don't know why, but I'm going to say Boston.
you're as far away. Well, not as far away, but you're very far away. Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, yeah. See,
And
I was never. I think I've had White Castles twice in my life.
well, I could remember there was a restaurant called White Tower. Do you remember White Tower restaurants? They
No,
were around for maybe about a blink of an eye. They even
no.
had a theme song. I used to hear their commercials, I think on CBS News Radio 88. God knows how many years ago. But anyway, that's number one. Question number two is what you might know this, Joe, being the chef that you are. What vegetable is used to thicken gumbo? Or yeah,
Oh my God, I forgot. Oh Jesus. What vegetable is used to thicken gumbo? I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank. I was gonna think of maybe some kind of squash, like a butternut squash or something, but I don't think that's the right answer. So,
it's okra.
oh, okra. Oh, sure. Okay. I love fried
Yeah,
okra.
yeah.
Used to eat it all the time when I was down south.
And I used to watch her all the time in the afternoon. Okra Winfrey.
I'll
You know
go away. Next.
that. Question three: what color are Mickey Mouse's shorts?
Oh, I have no. I'm not looking at his. I'm not looking at his shorts for God's sake. I have no idea.
Do you realize that Mickey Mouse wears shorts? Donald Duck does not wear shorts. He just wears a little top.
I
So
don't understand. I don't look for these things. So I don't know. Brown,
red.
red. Okay.
And the final one.
Not doing well today.
No, what year did the Titanic sink?
Well, that was 1912.
Right. And incidentally, in my zip code, you know how you have your zip code, a hyphen, and then four more numbers. It's your zip code plus
Right.
four. Mine, and I always remember this. I just tell people, I said, just remember the year the Titanic sunk. My four numbers were indeed 1912.
Oh, very good. Well, it
So
was always the old joke when I worked for NBC years ago, when NBC was in many years ago, when NBC was basically in the toilet of the three networks. The running joke there was what's the difference between NBC and the Titanic?
right,
The
and
Titanic had entertainment.
and entertainment.
Okay. So, as Joe and I rearrange the deck chairs here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, again, a reminder that this show is available as a podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you call podcasts your home. So just search for Joe and Joe Weather Show using the word and not the ampersand. Okay?
Right.
And
And believe it or not, after we shut down here, I'm going to proceed to the National Weather Association annual conference. Now, Joe, I'd be interested to know from our viewers what they think about this. Every 3 years, I attend a conference, chiefly because that's the way I would get my TV seal recertified.
right.
And I've gone to various different locales over the years to St. Louis, to Louisville, to Salt Lake City. This year, of course, no conference physically, but you do
Virtually.
it. You do it, yeah. And people and you may and people have asked, a couple of people have asked, why are you bothering? Because if it's for recertification of your television seal, he said, but Joe, you're not in television anymore, so why are you even bothering to do that? But I do it partially out of force of habit, I guess, and partially because I hold on. I figure, well, if I still have a valid seal, this will be the last time. I think
All
for
right. I did the same thing.
yeah,
I mean, I have my AMS seal and I renewed it, my broadcast seal, even though um, I'm not on TV anymore either.
and I think it's also
Also out of force of habit. Although I think we can use those seals here. By the way, I think we can display them on our YouTube show.
we could, I think, and also there another methodology would be that I could say, hold it, put a stop on this because I'm not doing anything, but we can start up again when I do get a position. But like I said, and also it's a bargain this year. I mean, there are a lot of interesting lectures and things that you could partake in
Right.
now online. But this time, all I had to do now this year is just pay the registration fee. I didn't have to worry about 5 days at a hotel. I didn't have to worry about flying somewhere.
Right.
So it's. I
It's a
look at it
different.
differently.
It's a new world.
It's a new world. It's a
It's a new
bargain,
world.
and
It's a new
and I
world that would have shown up maybe 5 or 10 years from now, but because of the pandemic, it all got compressed in about 5 weeks. Is
correct. And
basically what
so,
we've seen.
and if anybody out there is interested, anybody who's in broadcasting and wants a long time TV weathercaster slash broadcast meteorologist who is still accredited, who will still have his seal of approval, Joe. You can get in contact with me. I'm doing this. I'm doing this again, probably for the last time. I'm figuring that in 2023, well, I'll already be on Medicare, and I'll already be collecting Social Security. So
Are you going to
that's
need
it.
a walker to get to the screen?
Well, the funniest thing I ever saw was years ago, Joe Whitty, we're still trying to get to. Joe, if you're watching now,
Answer your darn email for Christ's sake.
we want you, Joe, on Joe and Joe. If Joe Whitty is watching us right now, I remember a long time ago when he was on Channel 2. He was the afternoon, evening meteorologist there. He somehow either sprained or broke his leg. Still, the trooper that Joe was, he came on, did his weather on crutches. And while Jim Jensen was like laughing his head off, he had at the end of one crutch an arrow, and he's using the arrow on the crutch to point out the various weather systems. And I said, "This is the
So,
greatest weathercast I've ever seen in my entire
so the
life."
lesson here is if you can do it, if you can get on crutches to do a weathercast, you certainly can answer an email so that you can be on our show because it doesn't
Our
require
famous
you to
Joe and Joe
stand up.
weather show. Yes, indeed.
So get off the schneid, Mr. Whitty. We want you here. Oh
It
boy.
would be great.
Oh yeah.
It would be great to have Joe Whitty, and if somehow you could manage to talk Alan Casper into coming on, although Alan would need a
Well,
camera, and that
well,
would be an
we
investment.
had the flip phone
But we
conversation
would
here.
have, think about this now, we would have the two people who many of us back in the day, we all grew up with watching Joe Whitty and Alan Casper on Channel 2, and we'd have them together again here on the Joe and Joe show.
Well, you know what? Let me see if I can.
You work on
I
you
have a
work on Casper, I'll work on Whitty.
all right. I have a feeling that he's not going to be too receptive because again, the problem is technology. But let me see what I can manage here.
Okay.
Okay. But we first things first is we need him to answer his email. So now that we've shamed him on air, or at least now that I've shamed him on air, maybe he will rise and click on his little email inbox and respond to you so we can set up a time. By the way, let me just remind a couple folks tomorrow night. I know we usually go on at 7 o'clock, but tomorrow night I'm doing a virtual library appearance at the Bayport Blue Point Library at 7 o'clock. At least I think I am. They haven't told me that they've canceled it. What we're going to do is I'm going to do that, and then when it's done, we'll go to the Joe and Joe show. So it probably will be closer to 8:30 or 9 o'clock tomorrow, Eastern PM Eastern time. So just Just bear that in mind.
As
So
long as we're done by 9:30, because at 9:30 tomorrow night on MeTV, they're going to show the very first episode of Green Acres.
okay,
And the reason why I that's to me a special thing is that on that very first episode, the moderator of What's My Line and a very well-known newscaster in his own right, John Daly,
right.
they did what's called a mockumentary of the story about
I do remember that episode. Yes, the
this
mockumentary
rich
style.
this rich attorney or this lawyer from Manhattan who threw it all away to buy the Haney place in Hooterville and become a farmer. And it is a very funny episode, and they're running it tomorrow night on. So it's a big night on television, Joe.
Yes.
It's Green Acre. It's the first Green Acres tomorrow night, followed 2 hours later by the Perry Mason in living color.
Yes, yes. Jason Barry asked, "Can you watch the library presentation?" I think what you have to do is go to the Bayport Blue Point Library website, and that's in Bayport, Blue Point, New York. Okay, and I think you need to register there to watch it. I haven't figured out yet, although I'm sure there's probably a way that I can simulcast it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do that and figure it out in time for tomorrow. So if you want to watch it or be part of this, you can go to the Bayport Blue Point Library, and because they're going to do it on Zoom, so I guess what they do is they give everybody a Zoom link. All right.
Right.
So
And another name, by the way, that people have been bringing up on the chat board to go along with Joe and Alan, Pat Pagano. Although I've only spoken to Pat Pagano maybe twice in my entire life, although he's been a mainstay on WALK radio on Long Island, Joe, for God knows how many years.
well, we can work on these people. And by the way, it's not just emails that they don't respond to. I mean, I've direct messaged many folks who I either never hear back from, or when I do hear back from them, it's weeks later. And I understand people seem to think that it's easy to get to set up guests, and it really isn't. Because everyone has got lives to live. I'm not being critical of the fact that they're not answering, or maybe I am. I don't know. But but the bottom line is, it's not easy to get guests because everybody's got things to do, and you have to sort of mesh it into your schedule, and it's tough, and I get that.
The late great Ralph Kiner, when he had Kiner's Corner, they actually used to, in the early days of Kiner's Corner, they would offer the ball player to appear on his show after the game $50, and then they went then they
Well,
decided to
we
work.
ain't doing that. We're not giving $50. Okay,
I
it's just
know
I can
that.
say you can give. No, we're not doing that. No.
And then they offered something different than money. They offered, like, one time Ralph said we gave them steak knives, a steak knife set, and then one of the ball players actually came back to Ralph and said the steak knife that you gave me broke. Where can I get a replacement? And like Ralph said, you're on your own with that one. I don't supply replacements for broken steak
Yeah,
knives.
that's probably back at those were the days where they used to drive their own cars to the stadium.
Right, right,
They didn't have services picking them up and
exactly.
taking them there. All right, listen, let's wrap it up so we can enjoy the rest of this decent day. Thanks everybody for being here again. Tomorrow night, probably figure 8:30 or 9 o'clock Eastern time for the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and it will only last as long as 9:30 because somebody has to watch the first episode of Green Acres. Okay.